I'd had no clue at that time that I would be a first-round pick in the NBA. So I was, banking on my work and all the different things that would get me to a place where I could be a first-round pick in the NBA. And I just, after that, my prayer actually was to be able to open the door, close the door. Lord, just open the door, close the door. And he did. He closed the NFL door by not drafting me at all. And then I went and put all my time and energy in preparing for the NBA combine process.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors. All the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with legendary FSU quarterback Charlie Ward. His resume also includes 1993 Heisman Trophy winner, 11-year NBA veteran, longtime high school coach and public speaker. But to the Thomasville, Georgia native, the roles of community leader, mentor, husband, and father have always been most important. Charlie and his wife Tonja run the Ward Family Foundation and are currently developing the Champions Ranch, the vehicle for the foundation's mission to develop youth character rooted in Christian principles through sports, arts, education, and wellness. One of Florida State's most beloved athletes, Charlie shares about his college journey that included a detour through Tallahassee Community College, now Tallahassee State College, how Coach Bobby Bowden had to be convinced that Charlie was a good fit for his program, balancing the demand of basketball and football, and breaking the race barrier as FSU's first black quarterback. We begin our conversation talking about growing up in Thomasville.
Well, my parents were educators, and my dad was a coach. My mom's a librarian. My dad also taught social studies, and had six siblings. There's 7 of us total. So we grew up in a relatively large family. Good part about it was at one point we weren't all in the house at the same time. We have really 2 sets, the older group and then the younger group. But
where are you in the order?
I'm third oldest.
Okay.
We grew up just like anyone else during that time. Went outside and played a lot. Had rules and regulations that we had to follow.
Like what? What were some of those? Home before the lights go on?
Home before the lights go on. Couldn't go outside to play if parents were home. You standard. You had your, nights that you had to wash dishes, clean up the kitchen, make your beds, all those different things. So just the normal rules and regulations that you had to follow. And, we were in a neighborhood. We always played in the neighborhood. Our gang activity, in a sense, was, going to play other neighborhoods. So in sports, that was like what we consider our gang affiliation.
Okay. So there was some pride in representing
correct.
Your neighborhood?
Yeah. So we weren't into violence and those types of things. We just enjoyed our neighborhood playing against other neighborhoods and more bragging rights than anything else. And so that was always fun.
Like mainly football or basketball or what?
Yes, mainly football and basketball. And we would go and meet at a park or somewhere where they had a field and play. And so those were always fun times. They were sandlot football games, and sometimes they were organized, sometimes they weren't.
Tackle?
Tackle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it was all fun. Growing up in Thomasville wasn't a large place, so everyone kind of knew each other.
Yeah.
We all played, Little League, either football, flag football, basketball, baseball. We all kind of played together growing up. And then, there's a city and a county two school systems. And And so I ended up end up in both of them because my parents were in both. So I grew up going to Harper Elementary in Thomasville for elementary school and McIntyre Park for middle school, 5th and 6th grade.
Yeah.
And then middle school, I went to Magnolia Middle School, which was in the county, and then went to Central High School, which was the high school, so in the county. So I just enjoyed all those small town things that you normally get to enjoy.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know your dad was your dad a football coach or a basketball coach?
He coached both at
the
time.
All right. So I know you said you played on the team. So was tossing a ball around, being athletic for your whole family, was that just kind of part of who your family was? Or did everybody do that and your dad encourage that, or it just happened naturally?
No, I was the one that did it all the time.
Okay.
That was my gift, my calling in a sense. I just played all the time. Like no one had to tell me to go pick up a ball or, I did a lot of different things. So that was just me. I broke a lot of things. I
throwing balls in the house?
Or not just balls, but socks. Whatever I could get to make into a ball. So those things were a part of my everyday occurrence. Like it just happened naturally, whether it was touching the top of a door or trying to touch the ceiling to see how high I could jump, or playing paper football, in the hallway.
Yeah.
So it was just those activities that I enjoyed doing.
Yeah, figuring out ways to challenge yourself and do new things.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about your mom a little bit. Did you get in trouble when you broke things in the house, or what was her role in all of this?
Well, of course, I always got in trouble when I broke stuff, and I was no different than any other kid. When you break something, and if you could try to piece it back together without someone knowing, you did that. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, someone goes and knocks it, and it comes apart.
Like barely touches it, and it falls apart.
And so you find your way getting into trouble. But
yeah,
and I broke a lot of windows, not just our own, but other neighbors' windows with kicking footballs and hitting baseballs and those types of things. So.
All right. Well, your mom and dad recently celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary, right?
Correct.
So that's pretty awesome. What do how inspirational is that to you when you think about your, the marriage and the role model your parents have been for you in that way?
Yes. Of course, being married, it definitely helps to have role models for that. And they've had their ups and downs, as parents, as husband and wife, but one of the things they were willing to do is stick it out. And their first reason for doing that is because they had a relationship with our Heavenly Father. So, they're going to make a decision. They made a decision that they were going to stick with one another through thick and thin. Like I said, they're great role models for my wife and I. We've been married for 29 years, which has been a great blessing. Of course, a great benefit for my mom and dad, for me to see my mom and dad, because they had their own lives and, they both worked and they came together on certain things to make sure that, they cover for one another, because kids are kids and, they did all they could to make sure that they were on the same page. And when they weren't, they made it work.
Yeah.
So that's always great.
Yeah. That's a great model. All right, so you mentioned earlier you went to Thomas County Central for high school, and did you play basketball, football, and baseball there? Or did you have to focus a little more?
No, I played basketball, football, and baseball one year, ran track one year, my junior year, and played baseball my senior year. I got injured in the spring, or was injured in the spring, my freshman and sophomore years, so I wasn't able to play anything in the spring.
Okay. Yeah, I read that your mom had said that a knee injury you got in high school ended up being an important point in your life for your future. What did she mean by that?
Well, it helped define, that I was not invincible as an athlete, because sometimes when you're younger, you feel like there's nothing that can stop you.
Yeah.
And so that knee injury really helped me to understand and focus on the other part of me, which was my spiritual growth, as well as, my academics. Because at that time, I had given my life to the Lord, and I was on that journey, and I was not really feeling the academic piece because I just wanted to play sports.
Sure.
I knew I needed to do it just so that I could play sports, but God removed that element that I really, really wanted, which was the sports component. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up focusing on the academic piece. I did a science project on my knee injury, which helped me to start to understand, a little bit about the body, and ended up winning third place in the science fair, which gave me great confidence to know that I could do it from an academic standpoint. And that was kind of what I do think that's what my mom was speaking about, was helped me become well-rounded as a person.
What was your favorite sport to play in high school?
Sport.
Anything?
Yes. So if it was anything sports related, I enjoyed doing it.
So you didn't have one. You couldn't have chosen one. If you could only pick one sport to play, you would have had a hard time doing that?
Yes. I wouldn't have chosen one. That's why I didn't choose one.
Okay. Interesting. All right. So you're obviously, doing well in high school, and I'm sure you attracted some attention. Were you heavily recruited coming out of high school for basketball or football?
I had quite a few letters flowing in, because during that time there was letters.
Right.
That schools
much different process.
Yes. And so I had a lot of shoe boxes full of letters from different schools all over the country for football, and then, some for basketball. They started to wane off a little bit, my junior and senior year, because even during that time, it was all predicated on, the list, just very similar to how it is today. But now they have combines and national combines you can go to be a part of that list. For me, during that time, we were, there were people very similar to the scripts and all the different, national lists that they have out there today. They were mainly Georgia, Florida, more state-based, and then there were some that were nationally ranked. But I was one of the top quarterbacks coming out of high school, and so there were some schools that stopped recruiting me at the end because of whatever their situation was with the quarterback position.
Okay.
But I took a couple of visits. I know I went to University of Georgia, I went to Georgia Tech, I went to Florida State, and Auburn. Did a couple of unofficial visits to watch them play. So it's those were the main four schools that they ended up becoming. Louisville, Coach Danny Crum actually came down to watch me play, but I was injured at that time. That was around my sophomore year, when they were here in town to play FSU. But that was encouraging, to be able to see Coach Crum, because he's a legendary coach.
Sure.
And so for him to be in Thomasville coming to watch me play was super encouraging.
Yeah, I bet.
So, but those were, I didn't really get into it. I enjoyed the process, but it wasn't a big issue, a big thing for me, because I just didn't like,
the dog and pony show of it all?
Yeah, I didn't like all that.
Yeah. All right, so, and we'll talk about your pit stop at Tallahassee Community College in a second, but why did you end up choosing Florida State? How did that happen?
Well, actually, Coach Bowden had to be convinced that I was a good fit for the quarterback position at Florida State because of a certain stigma, a certain style that they were looking for, I should say. I grew up, I played 3 years in the system that they had currently, had played in. And, the system was the system. I grew up in it, I formation, split back underneath the center. that's what we did.
Stayed in the pocket?
Well, that wasn't really, Casey Weldon was a guy who didn't stay in the pocket. He was mobile as well.
Okay.
And like I said, that was me as well. I just could move. I used my legs to do different things.
Right.
But once I go through that process, I had to be convinced. Coach Bowden had to be convinced that I was a good fit for them because I was more of a rollout, veer type of quarterback. That's what system I played in high school. But I was a guy who could throw, hit my target, and also make guys miss running wise. And so I guess I got stigmatized as a runner as opposed to a complete quarterback. And he felt like that may not have been the best person for me, best school for me. So, but Coach Wayne McDuffie, late Wayne McDuffie, actually had to convince Coach Bowden that I was more than just what they thought, what he thought, that I could play in a system similar to his, and it will look different. But
did you want to play in that system?
Well, I wanted to. I really didn't worry about the system because that was my big issue. I knew who I was, what I was capable of doing, and I wanted to. The reason I chose Florida State is because Coach Bowden allowed Brad Johnson to play basketball and football, and so that was one of the main reasons why. And also, Coach Bowden was a Christian, and growing up in a Christian household, I wanted to continue to be under that tutelage, and it was closer to my hometown,
sure,
to where people who supported me could come and watch me play.
Yeah. All right, so you're offered a scholarship. Everything looks like it's on track, and then there's a slight academic hiccup. Even though you were a really good student in high school, right? Your test score wasn't where it needed to be, so you ended up at Tallahassee Community College for a little bit. So how did you handle that? Was that a setback emotionally for you, or did you just see it as the next step, or kind of what were you thinking during that time?
Well, I knew what I needed to do as far as the test score, and so I was working diligently to make it happen with tutoring and all the different things that I needed to do to try to get the score, and I ended up missing it by 10 points, I think it was, and I had two choices. Either I can go Prop 48, which meant that I would lose a year of eligibility, but I could still go to Florida State, but I couldn't play. Or I could do a gap year and go to, at the time, as TCC, and not become a full-time student, but take some classes to get some of the prerequisite classes that you normally get in college out of the way. And I ended up playing intramural flag football and basketball.
What did they think of you on the intramural field? I can't imagine regular guys out there playing and all of a sudden Charlie Ward shows up.
Well, I was just having fun. So
yeah,
enjoyed, their camaraderie and friendship with all of that, and had a friend of mine who was in college at FAMU. He's from Thomasville. We used to go to the weight room and lift and do those types of things. So I stayed with my sister and my cousin while I was there. And so it helped me mature a little bit because I was young coming out of high school as well. And it helped me mature a little bit during that time. And I just enjoyed it. It wasn't really something that it damaged my ego or any of that, those types of things.
So it ended up being a good next step for you.
Yes. And then I still had to pass the test.
Yeah.
So in order to be admitted to Florida State, and so I had to go through that process, got the tutoring I needed, and ended up passing the test right before, like, one of the last times that I could take it. So I ended up making it happen, and enrolled in Florida State the next year.
Yeah. And you kept all your eligibility doing it that way?
Yes. Was able to keep all my eligibility.
All right, so 1989, you get to FSU, and you immediately contribute to the team as a punter. Had you punted a lot of, were you the punter in high school? I mean, I obviously you punted before, but was that a regular part of your duties on the team?
Yes, I was the main punter. That's actually when I was injured my sophomore year. That was the only thing that I could do while I was injured at that time. The doctor told me I could be the punter for the year, but he was hesitant on playing quarterback. But our quarterback got hurt that year, and I ended up having to play throughout, finish the season as a quarterback. But I also actually won the punt, pass, and kick competition as an 7th and 8th grader growing up.
Oh, really? That's great.
In my hometown.
Yeah.
And so that was a great experience, as well.
Have you ever seen those videos of Andy Reid doing that when he's like double the size of every other kid?
Yes, I've seen that. So I had experience, and they knew that.
Yeah.
And our punter, the reason I was asked to compete for the job was our punter, who was on scholarship, was coming off of knee surgery.
Yeah.
And so he was trying to work his way back, and he wasn't quite ready. So we were like emergency. So it was me and walk-on that was vying for that spot to punt, and I ended up winning the competition.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Unexpected, but kind of a nice little twist there, I guess. And you were also the scout team quarterback, so you were mimicking the upcoming opponent, right, for the starting offense. And I understand you were causing some problems for them, that they asked you to tone it down a little bit or not be quite so good.
Well, I don't know. It was either they hit me a lot or I move out of their way. So that was always my deal.
So it's self-preservation.
Yes. Right? I was just going off instincts. When they were moving fast, I had to move out of their way.
Right.
But when it was all said and done, my job was to prepare them for the quarterback that they'll be competing against on Saturdays. And so I wanted to make sure that I was doing my part to prepare them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it did get to a point where they were asking me to, slow it down a little bit, but that group was very talented.
Yeah. Yeah. The building blocks of a national championship team in just a couple of years. The next year you're behind two guys who would go on to the NFL, Casey Weldon and Brad Johnson. But you pushed Coach Bowden that year to keep a promise to you, right, to play basketball. So that was, you were firm that that's one of the reasons you came to FSU, and you asked Coach Bowden to release you during the spring to play basketball, right?
Well, actually, he didn't release me in the spring. It was my second year. He allowed me to go out and play basketball full time. And so I just had to come. When I came to football practice, it was to be the scout team quarterback. And then I went and practiced basketball, afterwards. And I didn't travel that year.
Okay.
Because I was redshirting in football.
Right. Saving your year of eligibility.
Correct. So I was getting a chance to play basketball full time. And that was one of my better years because I was in basketball shape.
Yeah.
Throughout. And
is there a difference between basketball and football shape?
Yes, there is. There's night and day.
Okay.
But I was grateful for him because most times coaches wouldn't allow at least football players to go and play another sport full time. And so, like I said, I would come out and be the scout team quarterback. And then I would go and practice basketball after football practice. And I just had to make sure I maintained my grades throughout that time.
Yeah.
And I didn't travel with the football team. So once basketball season started, I was going to play basketball.
Yeah.
Which was, like I said, a great blessing for me because it allowed me to establish myself as a basketball player. It helped when it came time for me to come back when I started playing. So that, to me, was the biggest difference for me, being able to play both sports for 4 years.
Right.
Because of that first year, being able to establish myself as a basketball player and essentially, kind of save my spot when I came back.
Right. So when you came in later, it wasn't, well, here's the football guy trying to play basketball.
Correct.
Right, yeah. And you weren't just playing basketball. I mean, we need to touch on this. You were playing with Bobby Sura, Sam Cassell, Doug Edwards. I mean, this was a team that made it to, in the next year or two, made it to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. You know, this was a super successful team, national prominence, really the best teams Florida State had had probably since the Dave Cowens era. You know, so what was it like being part of that? We were not a basketball school really at the time. And here we're having all this success, and you were the point guard leading the team. I mean, what did that feel like? That must have been a lot of fun.
Well, actually, the year before, the year I was just talking about I call it my true my freshman year in basketball.
Yeah.
First year, I should say. We ended up winning the Metro Conference that year, championship, which kind of started the trend. And
was that the last year of the Metro, or was there one more?
Last year of the Metro.
Okay.
Yes, last year of the Metro. And then we moved into the ACC the next year in '91 for basketball, and that's where we had Sura, Bob Sura was there. You know, Doug Edwards was there as well. Sam Cassell came in that year, and so it was a year that we were definitely looking forward to growing. You know, as a team. And, you know, when you start talking about those guys, you know, I was just one of those guys, and we all collectively worked well together, because when I came back from football, it worked even better because it put everyone in their right position. Because I was more of a distributor, and Sam was more of a scorer, so was Bob, and Doug was a good distributor, but he was also one of our facilitators. And so being able to relieve them of some of the pressure of having to set guys up and do
bringing the ball
things,
up court, all that.
They could do that,
yeah,
but that wasn't what they want to do.
Sure.
So it helped us in that sense, being able to just play my role.
All right, so next year, 1992 in football, that's kind of laid the groundwork, and you're the starting quarterback, right, in '92, and you are having some success, but it's really kind of laying the groundwork for the next year, which of course would be the national championship year. But
how do you deem success?
Okay, so you don't consider '92 a successful year?
Oh, yes. When it's all said and done in totality, it was a great foundational year. I would agree.
Okay, so tell me. So when you think about that year, then what are your memories of that? How do you categorize that year when you think about your football career?
Well, every year for me is a success.
Okay.
Regardless of the outcome is not what we desire.
Okay.
Because it's something that we can all learn from, as long as we learn a lesson from the situation. So, you know, my first year as a quarterback, I was very inexperienced, and that led to a lot of different mishaps. So when we were talking earlier about me being a fit for Coach Bowden's original offense, and my junior year, they changed the entire offense to better suit our, not just my skill set, but the skill sets that we had around us.
All right. Before we go on to the national championship year, which I just touch on for a little bit, I did want to ask you, there was another, in addition to style of play, a more significant issue is you were FSU's first black starting quarterback. Just wanted to get your thoughts. Was that significant to you? Did you carry any weight with that? Did it matter to you? Just what were your thoughts?
There's a documentary that Michael Vick just put out called The Evolution of the Black Quarterback.
I saw that, yeah.
Which was very well done by him and his team. And I was grateful that they asked me to be a part of it, even though I wasn't part of the NFL deal. But being the first black quarterback at Florida State was one of my goals, because coming out of high school, there are quite a few people in my hometown, black people, that was saying I shouldn't go to Florida State because Coach Bowden had never played a black quarterback. And, of course, you know, for me, one of the things he told me was if I wanted to play quarterback, I would have to be patient and wait. And so, I had a goal of being the first black because that never happened. And then someone, like I mentioned, challenged me that he had never played. So I was like, well, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that happens. And so I had to wait, which was the deal. And so I was grateful that I had.
Which most of the quarterbacks had to wait. I mean, that was kind of his style overall,
correct.
Right?
Yes. So it wasn't just a black deal, but like Casey Weldon and Brad Johnson had to wait. My first year there, Peter Tom Willis was a quarterback. And Peter Tom had to wait. I mean, Peter Tom didn't play until like his last year.
Yeah, he didn't start anybody before their junior year normally at that point.
So it was just a system deal. I was willing to wait my time. There were guys who came in before me that were probably better quarterbacks. A guy by the name of Deion Sanders and Tracy Sanders. But they ended up moving to defensive back because of just the system. Like, those guys are probably better than the guys that were playing at the time. Yeah. But they weren't going to change the system.
Well, it worked out pretty well for Deion, I guess.
Yes, it did. But I was willing to wait. And when we talk about the weight of it, I'm glad we didn't have social media, because I'm sure when I was struggling, there were words, and I probably got letters. I didn't read them. Miss Sue Hall, she read all my mail before it got to me. So I'm sure I got some hate mail, all those different things, because that's just the way it was during that time. But I never heard any words outside of being booed at home for throwing multiple interceptions in a game, which that was their prerogative.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's race related. That still happens.
Yeah, that happens. That still happens today.
And we'll be right back. How I Got Here is sponsored by Barano Heating and Air Conditioning in Tallahassee. I've been friends with Patrick Barano since we met in a chamber leads group about 15 years ago. I'll admit that I pursued him pretty hard to be his marketing firm and eventually won him over. And the reason I wanted to work with him is that I was already a customer and I knew what kind of company he and his father before him had built. He cares about his customers, he cares about his team, and he cares about this community. I've experienced Barano Heating and Air when they installed a complete system replacement a few years ago, and I enjoy peace of mind and same-day service with my Total Comfort Service Agreement. I've also been behind the scenes at their office and seen firsthand the true character of this company. And that's why we're so proud to represent them. To learn more or to schedule an appointment online anytime, visit baranoac.com. They really always will be there for you. And now back to the show. All right, so the next year, 1993, FSU would go on to win its first national championship, long-awaited national championship. And you would go on to win the Heisman Trophy, football's highest honor for an individual, and also 30 other awards for quarterback, offensive player. Just pretty much you swept all the major awards and won the Heisman by the second largest margin to that point in history. So it was an amazing year, both as for a team and an individual accomplishment. So when you think back on that year, I mean, that was a magical year for you and the team. Just, what comes to mind when you think about 1993?
Well, we dominated a lot of the games, especially early on. And we had a team that offensively, we got a lot of the headlines. And then defensively, people were saying we don't know who they are because the offense got all the headlines. But the great part about it was we competed every day against them. We knew we were capable of what we had as a unit, and they did not allow that press or
lack of it
to separate us. They understood that we were all one team, and they had to go out and prove themselves through their work and what they put on the field. And so the first game against Kansas,
greatest goal line stand in history.
Very good goal line stand, which kind of set the tone for that season. Then they had another one, against Clemson. And so they just continued to fuel that fire, and they were outscoring our opponents in like the first 3 or 4 games, whatever it was. And so that was very encouraging, because when you have an explosive offense like we had, you need a really, really good defense to be able to, if you're going to win a national championship.
Yeah.
And so we had both of those components. We were explosive on offense, and defensively we were really, really solid. And that kind of played out in those first all the way up until the Notre Dame game.
Right.
We had played really, really well, even against Wake Forest, where we struggled a little bit, ended up getting hurt.
Yeah.
Ended up getting hurt in the Wake Forest game that year. But we beat Miami at home, which was
these were nemesis. After the wide right games,
yes,
right?
Yes. Which was our nemesis for so many years.
Yeah.
We would be winning the games, and then they would score at the end to go up. That happened the year before. And so this year, Devin Bush was like, we're not allowing that to happen. So ended up getting a pick six at the end to extend that lead. We scored 21 points in the first half to jump out. Defense only gave up, I think, 7 points at that time. And then in the end, we won the second half 7-3. The defense gave up 3 points.
Yeah.
So we ended up winning 28-10. But it was just a very good team that played well together.
Yeah. All right, and then you would go on, obviously, to win the national championship and a close game with Nebraska. And that was, even that was very Bobby Bowden-ish, I guess, or FSU-ish in the way that we thought it was one, and then they drove down one last chance for a field goal to break our hearts, and thankfully it didn't happen. So we walked away.
It was a very good game.
Yeah.
Everyone thought that the game would be like the year before, where we won 28-14 in the Orange Bowl against Nebraska, but we knew it'd be different.
Tommy Frazier was
quarterback, actually both years, and so it was a difficult game. Like, offensively, we struggled. They did very well to disrupt our passing game, and offensively, the run game, we were able to muster up some runs to move the football. But it was a grinded out game.
Yeah.
And defensively, our defense held us in the mix again, to where they gave us an opportunity to drive the football down late to kick the game-winning field goal.
It wasn't going to be easy.
Right. So it wasn't easy.
Yeah. That was a great moment. All right. This is our last – we're going to leave football here in a second, but this last part is the NFL draft, and then ultimately the NBA draft. So you make it clear that you're going to be selective in your options for the NFL draft. If you want to go in the first round, and if you don't think that's going to happen, then you're going to hold back and think about playing basketball. Right, and you ended up being drafted by the Knicks in the first round of the NBA draft, the first Heisman Trophy winner ever to go to play in the NBA. What were your thoughts there? When you're considering the NFL draft, and that you have what it takes to play in the NBA as well, and that option's out there for you, and kind of where your heart is and your goal, and where you see your life after college.
Yeah, all my life I've been a guy who kind of made decisions well thought out.
Mm-hmm.
I pondered them probably sometimes too long. But one of the things I want to do as well is, I want to enjoy where I am at the moment. When I was in high school, my mom had to tell me, hey, you need to make your decision, like where you want to go to college. And this was a couple weeks before signing day.
Mm.
And once I got to this situation and getting prepared for a transition to professional life, I was living in the moment, which, I was playing basketball, enjoying it, and I wanted to keep my options open there. So that's one of the reasons why I played. And the other reasons was, I wanted to play because I was a senior leader on the basketball team. And so I didn't want to abandon that role. And that was just my heart. I knew that my choice could affect my NFL career because that meant that I was going to miss the NFL Combine during that time. And I wasn't prepared to go and do any interviews or perform. So I chose not to. And I did go after the season to one of the NFL combines where they bring back guys who have been injured. They talk to the team doctors and those types of things. So I did go to that combine, and I did have pro day. I guess the tough part was I showed up pro day in basketball shape because I've been working out for basketball after the season to get prepared for, the NBA combine, because I felt like that was where I was lacking or would be lacking skill development. If I was going to be able to make the NBA or have that as an option, I had to put more time and work into some of the skill development work. So that's what I was doing the majority of the time. And I did go out and throw, periodically to get prepared for the pro day. But then I doubled down on all of that by saying if I didn't get chosen in the first round, which I knew I wouldn't, that I would, consider my other options if I got chosen after that.
Right.
And so the NFL felt like I wasn't 100% committed, which I was not. I wasn't committed 100% because I wanted to have options, have my options. And once the NFL draft came around, first round went, I knew I wasn't getting drafted there because during that time, they weren't drafting guys my size in the first round. You had to be a certain height, weight, and they were looking for pocket passer type players.
Right.
And I understood that. It had nothing to do with race. A lot of people say it was race. There were some times, if you go and look at the evolution of black quarterback, there was a time when that was the case. But for me, that wasn't fully the case in a sense, because they just weren't drafting guys my height. And so it was in the first round, I should say. Mm-hmm. First round came and went, knew that wasn't happening. And then I got a call in the fifth round from the Kansas City Chiefs. They asked me if I would be willing to come and be the backup for Joe Montana and then take over for after he retired, which he was on the back end of his career.
Right.
It was very enticing for sure.
Yeah.
But I told him that I couldn't guarantee him that I would come to camp if I got drafted fifth round, because I wanted to weigh my options as far as the NBA.
Yeah.
And so it was a risk type of, it was a faith walk, because I'd had no clue at that time that I would be a first round pick in the NBA. So I was, banking on my work and all the different things that would get me to a place where I could be a first round pick in the NBA. And I just, after that, my prayer actually was to be able to open the door, close the door. I was, Lord, just open the door, close the door. And he did. He closed the NFL door by not drafting me at all. And then I went and put all my time and energy in preparing for the NBA combine process. My whole goal was just to play even with those guys who play basketball full time. And I was able to accomplish that doing all of that process. And people saw the upside. And so they were, along with the advocates, that helped me get to a point where people felt like I could be, a first round pick. And the New York Knicks saw that as well, and I was grateful for them giving me an opportunity.
Yeah. So tell us about that. You're playing football in Tallahassee, and now you're playing pro basketball in New York City, Madison Square Garden. What was that experience like, and your career there? You played for other teams toward the end of your career, but most of your pro basketball career was in New York. So what do you think about being at the Knicks?
Well, just to go back, when I went to the Heisman, while we were at the Heisman, had a great time there in New York. And, of course, being from Thomasville, all we heard about New York were what we saw on television. And, people killing, pickpocketing, people heard,
right. That was not a great time for New York City, right?
They pick your pockets, the people are rude. all those different things. But we were grateful to be there because of what we've heard about being in New York, especially New York City. And then all of my family got an opportunity to be there as well. So that was just a great blessing. But as I was leaving, I saw the people driving. The people didn't speak. That's different from when you're from the South. You know, you speak to everyone, but people there, they didn't seem to speak. And I was like, man, I was like, man, I could never live here. And so God's like, okay, well, here you go.
Here's something funny for you.
Yeah, six months later, I was chosen by the New York Knicks and ended up living in New York or in the area for almost 10 years. So,
joke's on you, I guess.
Yeah,
there.
If you want something to happen, just tell the Lord that you don't want it to happen. But I wouldn't trade it.
Yeah,
I wouldn't trade it for anything. The experience definitely made you tougher, for sure, mentally and physically. But being able to be in the New York market where you had everything that you would desire or want to be a part of right there. And so we indulged in some of that, but we picked and choose what we wanted to do, which is always, great to be able to do.
Yeah. It also gave you a platform to share your faith. I know that you had Bible studies with the team from what I've read and seen. And it just gave you an opportunity to reach people that you wouldn't have been able to otherwise, right?
That's true, 100%. Like I said, being in New York, it definitely gives you a bigger platform. And, just even if we were in a smaller market, being an NBA in general gives you a bigger platform. And so being able to have our Bible studies to encourage one another and also encourage, guys who weren't a part of the Bible study because they saw you in a different way, especially when challenges came. But more importantly, was to be able to share your faith about who Jesus Christ is in your life and how he's able to help you through and navigate through those ups and downs that you may have in life. And I always, going back to college, I was running away from being, I guess the top, always talked about the quarterback. I just wanted to play a certain part and not have to go through all the hoopla of having to do interviews and, your name always being called or you're always being asked to do different things. I was more of an introvert, and I would rather just be in the background. But my mom was like, no, I mean, you're the starting quarterback, on a nationally ranked team, and these are the obligations that you have to do as a part of that role. Yeah. And so when it was all said and done, I was running away from what God was calling me to do or be, which was to glorify him through my actions and the way I live my life. And so being given that platform was to be able to glorify him and share Christ with others. And so that's what I came to understand later as I matured in my faith. The reason why I was put on that platform or was given that platform was to make sure that others saw him through me. And of course, like I said, I had issues that I had to go through as well as the positives that everyone talks about and hear about. But I wouldn't trade it for anything else, the challenges I had to face in New York, because some of it was, a direct reflection of who I was in Christ. And there were those type of attacks and you having to fight for your faith and, humility was a part of it as well. And so I was grateful for, all those experiences to be able to, show that even though as Christians, it's not always, rosy.
Yeah. You mentioned your fiance at the time, Tonja, with you for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. Just want to talk about her and your marriage and the role she's played with you and you as a partnership. And we'll get into the foundation and stuff in just a minute on, what you're doing now. But just throughout your life and your journey, having her by your side and going through this stuff together, what has that meant to you?
Yes, we started dating. Actually, our families knew each other over the years. Our parents worked together in Thomasville. So that's kind of how our families came together. And so we started dating my senior year, her second year of law school. And she was at the University of Miami, in law school there. And she came down for our game, really a first time seeing her in quite some time. It was before we started dating. But she came down to the University of Miami game that we played here in 93. And then after that is when I had the courage to ask her if we could start dating. And so we started dating. It was long distance. And she ended up graduating from law school the next year. And it was after my first year. And so I asked her to marry me in 94. She came up for a event that the Knicks were having. It was a team event. And so I asked her to come up, and that's where I proposed there in New York. And she said yes at that time. And she was getting ready to graduate from law school. So we had planned to get married that August, 95, right after she graduated. And she made a sacrifice. I'm grateful for her. Like I said, we've been together for 29 years, and so she sacrificed a lot of the things that she wanted to do from a career standpoint to follow, my career and help support me. And I've supported her in a lot of different ways. And so when we talk about marriage, and there are things that we have to do, sacrifices we have to make to help one another develop and grow. And so she's been very sacrificial in her career to help support, what we wanted to do as a family, as a husband and wife and family. And so she gave up. She had some jobs, lined up after graduate school, and she decided to come to New York after we got married. And she actually passed the New York bar, and then she worked in some law offices, got into some sports agent work for a year and a half or so, which was, she did some great work there. And we started having kids. And once we started having kids, she made a decision to stay at home, or we made a decision.
Yeah.
So she stayed home until here the past 5 or 6 years is when she started to navigate her way through and do some consulting work. Again, she had to sacrifice something she wanted to do to follow my career. It was selfish on my part to move, looking back. But where we are today, we're in a great place when it comes to where God has led us. Those challenges that we went through definitely strengthened us as a family. That's kind of where we are, and we've started a foundation as well. Our foundation, the Ward Family Foundation. Yeah. It's been over a little over 3 years. We've established it, and we're doing some community work and things that we've been doing. We're partnering with. We support youth character development is our mission through work, through sports, arts, wellness, and education. And then we also support disaster relief efforts.
Okay.
So that's our mission for our foundation, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about what our foundation is looking to do.
Yeah, let's talk about that now. Yeah, so the ranch that you're looking to build, and you're in the process of getting all those things worked out. What is the vision for the Champions Ranch, and how that's going to serve young people, and what is yours and Tonja's vision for all that, and what are you hoping to accomplish with that?
Yeah, so during our time of being married, we've done a lot of outreach. We did basketball camps for girls and boys, Erie, Pennsylvania, New York, Houston, Thomasville, in different areas. We also did events, Christian outreach events, during All-Star Weekend. And so now that we're going to be here in Tallahassee, we are looking to build the Youth and Family Sports Education and Wellness Campus as a campus. So, and it's a collaborative effort that we're looking to bring together nonprofits and for-profits to be on one campus to service the community in different aspects. So it's just actually the campus is the vehicle for our mission. And it's not what we want to do alone. We're trying to do this as a group, as a community, to be able to service the youth and also build strong families through adult programming as well, so that we can have a one-stop shop model. So there'll be a counseling center there. We'll have a physical therapy presence, and all these will be partners that'll be at the Champions Ranch. The Boys and Girls Club will have their presence there. FCA will have a presence, and we'll have soccer. We'll have an indoor facility, turf facility, with some classroom spaces. Yeah. Batting cages. We'll have outdoor fields that will be multi-purpose. Everything will be multi-purpose. Then there'll be an indoor court barn, which will have 6 basketball courts, 12 volleyball courts, and 18 pickleball courts, along with human performance area, and then some other wellness professionals in the spaces. And essentially what we want to do is, like I say, have a one-stop shop model where you can get all your services there in some form or fashion, through whether it's wellness, through education. Yeah. Because we're looking to partner with FSU, TSC, and FAMU in some component to be able to bring some of their offerings to the Champions Ranch as well. Yeah. So that's the mindset or the reason why we're looking for philanthropic dollars to be able to support us so that we can get it built. We have a lot of programming because a lot of programs are already existing programs that are here in the community. But
just put them under one roof.
Put them under one roof, right. And also to help them grow, because a lot of them can grow.
And is the vision too? I know you're looking, or the plan is to build on the south side toward the airport. Is the idea to bring people in from out of town as well and make it more than just the Tallahassee area?
Yes, it's actually between Tram and Woodville Highway. We have 109 acres that we're getting ready to close on the end of this month. And the goal is a local, regional, and national draw. And, when you start thinking about local, you start thinking about regional, you start thinking about national. The key is relationships, who you know.
So it can be an economic driver for the community as well.
100%. It will be.
Yeah.
It will be. Yes, it will be an economic driver. So it'll be local, it'll be regional, it'll be national, because of relationships that we will have a part of the Champions Ranch. And that's what we're looking, we've been talking to people outside of Tallahassee from a philanthropic standpoint on just that fact. And it's centered around relationships.
Yeah, like everything.
100.
Yeah. All right, just last couple questions here, and I appreciate your time. You're working on all this with the ranch, but that's not all you do. Your full-time or regular day job, I guess, is you're the head basketball coach at Florida High. Want to dive into that a little bit? You were part of the school's first basketball state championship in 50 years or something, a really, really long time. Let's talk about that, about being back hands-on with the young athletes, kind of bringing, helping the next generation and being a coach and sharing your experiences. And I know just from our talk here, your number one priority is working with those young men and helping them become better people, but also better basketball players. So let's talk about that. What has it been like being a high school basketball coach? And also congratulations on all the success.
I appreciate it. And I've been coaching since I retired from the NBA. Coached 2 years afterwards. So like 2008, I've been coaching either football or basketball since that time.
Okay.
And so it's It's been rewarding in a lot of ways because, even you think about all the players that you've come across and you've been a part of their lives in some form during that stretch. And some you hear from and some, you see on social media now and you kind of connect there. But more importantly, just the seeds that were planted. And there were hard times. There weren't all winning seasons. There were hard seasons that you had to navigate your way through. There are poor judgments that you had to navigate your way through. Sure. To be able to help kids, help your students get to a point in their lives. And even as coaches, you have to navigate your way through, especially as a young coach. But all those things, because it goes back to my childhood. I grew up in sports, and I was on teams, and I had great coaches, and they taught me valuable lessons. And I think that is the same heart behind why, I do what I do. It's definitely not money, because it's not a lucrative thing coaching high school.
Right.
But more importantly, it's about what do we instill or what do we give to the young men or even women if you coach women, but what do you give to them to be lifelong champions? And so being able to give them a process, things that I had to navigate through, giving them structure, even if you don't win. Everybody wants to win, but sometimes that doesn't happen. But what can you give them to help them be better young men or young women? And so that's the goal through what we do. So being able to teach and coach the whole child is something that we work really hard to maintain through the process outside of just winning. Of course, we all, like I said, we all want to win, and that's like the focus a lot of times. But, seeing how you can help support. Because I always say, I was raised by a village. I had parents, but I also had people on the outside that helped me to navigate through some of the challenges. And I call that, village parents. That's what we are as coaches. That's what I talk to my coaches about, being, we have to be a part of that village, being able to help that student become the best person that they can be through their challenges. And so everything's not going to be according to their plan, but they have to be willing to understand that there's a team effort here. There's a team, and you have to play a role. And sometimes you may not like your role, but you have to be willing to play it in order to be the best that you can be, but also be the best for the group.
Yeah.
And each role could change. And so those are things that even in any relationship, the roles could change, as we just talked about, my wife and I, and, my role on my teams, understanding my role. That was the reason why I was able to play 11 years in the NBA. If I was trying to be the superstar or wanted to be the main scorer, I wouldn't have lasted. But I understood that I had to play a certain way, and that was my style, and I had to bring something to the team in order for me to be able to last 11 years. And so those are things that we're trying to instill in the young people that we've coached in.
Right. And like you said, there's always success if you can learn something from it, right?
Correct. 100%.
That's great. All right, 2 more questions. Charlie, looking back, what is the one thing or person that changed or altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
Well, of course, it's my Heavenly Father. Being able to have the conviction to know what's right from wrong, and be willing to change it definitely helps you navigate your way through, the challenges of life, whether it's relationships, whether it's your work ethic, whether it's your character. All those things play a big part in your success. And then he uses people to help you through that journey as well, that are like-minded. So I had quite a few coaches that helped prepare me. And Coach Bowden, of course, my mom and dad had coaches in high school that were Christian coaches. I had college coaches that were Christian coaches, and some, that weren't. But that didn't matter to me. It was more so, how they treated their players, and if they needed challenges, We challenged them some in that area, but and teachers as well. They help you navigate from that standpoint. So when it was all said and done, my Heavenly Father helped me to understand the importance of life, and how to navigate through it. And we talk about the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5. All those things are very beneficial. And then right before that, you have all the things that are opposed to, the Spirit of God. So being able to navigate all those emotions that we all have, I think having a relationship with Him definitely helps play a big part in, that discernment, the wisdom that comes from who you take it from.
Yeah. Right. The name of this podcast is How I Got Here. And we've talked to how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
Well, I'll be at a Champions Ranch. So that's my next move. My wife, she sacrificed a lot for my career. And I know this is a vision that God gave us both, but this is something that she's desired to do as well. And so I'm not chasing the coaching dream anymore. And I'll use my coaching dream to be at the Champions Ranch to help build it to where it can be a place where people can feel welcome, at home, grow, learn, develop into being the champion that God has called them to be, whatever that looks like for them. And so this is like the next phase for me, which is to partner with her and others to build the Champions Ranch to the level that God has given us the vision to make it happen.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.